the lunchroom can be the best classroom in America. And it needs to be because it can solve our greatest challenges. It can solve climate change and it can solve our health pandemic and it can solve help pandemic proof us in the future. And so we really think it's an important call to action to have all eyes on how do we redesign our food system with our children at the center and use schools as a platform to
Mm.
start there.
Welcome, Nora, to a whole new level.
Awesome. I'm so happy to be here and I'm such a fan. And as a female co-founder, I just really admire everything that you're building and all the awareness building that you're doing as well.
Thank you, and vice versa. And I am so excited for people to learn about EATReal. So, for those who are listening who are unfamiliar with this amazing organization, can you describe the mission and the organization?
Yeah, so Eat Real is a nonprofit that's really goal is to help every child learn to love real food for the well-being of their lives and then for themselves and also for our planet. We really see ourselves as a systems change nonprofit. And so we are doing policy and advocacy, we're doing massive awareness building, and then we have an award-winning program where we actually make real food more accessible. And so we're changing the game in schools. So we're making it so that schools can be the best, most delicious, culturally relevant, delicious, nutritious meal of a child's day. And sometimes it can be 30 to 100% of a kid's calories. And so we're really focused on empowering schools and school leaders to transform food in America, starting with schools. And that's the core of what we do.
Oh, that's so incredible. And it's so, so needed because um, we have a lot of opportunity with school lunches. I have heard um, people at your organization talk about how schools are kind of like the biggest restaurant chain in America in a sense. Like what does that mean? I don't think people realize that. Like what is the landscape of the school lunch system? And what are the challenges that we're facing today?
Yeah, when we back in 2019, when we decided to go all in on schools, we looked at how do we do our most good as a nonprofit? How can we have catalytic impact? How do we improve the health of the planet and fix the health crisis of our children? And when we looked at all the different systems that we could affect, what really stood out was the scale of our school system. Schools are the largest restaurant chain in America. They serve 5 billion meals a year. If you think about it, like there's one in almost every community in every town, and they're serving high volume and they're serving our most important, most vulnerable population, our children. And so we think if you can help people develop healthy habits, you want to start that early, and what a better platform to do it than at school.
Incredible, incredible. I can't believe, did you say 5 billion meals are served nationally per year in schools?
5 billion. So our program has had really fast growth. We've gone from 50 to 500 schools in 3 years. Last year we had over 400% impact growth. And this year we're on track to help make at least 120 million meals healthier and more sustainable, accessible to students. So like, and that's with a small and mighty nonprofit like ourselves, 120, that's huge amounts of impact. And then we still have, billions of meals to go, but we're going to get there. And so, if we were to pick one place within our food system to make change and our health model to really upstream health solutions, our schools is what we think is the best innovation platform in America.
Absolutely. And tell us a little bit about what is the current landscape of school lunches? Like why is there even the need for something like Eat Real? What are kids eating? What are they being served? What's the process that is being used to, supply and source foods for schools? What does the current landscape look like, and what do you feel that it needs to get to have better outcomes for children?
Yeah. So today, just zooming out a little bit in terms of the state of food for our children and the state of health in our children. Today, about 67% of a child's calories are ultra processed calories. And when we look, yeah, 67%. And we're in a children's health crisis, and we're not ringing the bell loud enough. I was pulling JAMA numbers, and since 2001, uh, childhood diabetes, type 2 diabetes, which is a processed food related disease at that point, uh, is up 100% in children in 20 years. So and then that's diabetes. Then we look at other markers, and we're seeing major cause for concern in terms of the state of children's health. And so when we look at our school food landscape, I don't know if you had school lunch growing up, but at first, in some places, it hasn't changed much since I had school lunch, or um, and there in some places though it really has, and it can be a delicious, amazing meal. Right now, school lunches, they're very time pressed. You only have like 20 minutes maybe for school lunch. You also, the budgets are really constrained. They're um, one number that I pulled was about $1.50 per meal on a food spend, which is a very, very small margin in order to make it super nutrient dense and sustainable, but it is possible. So the state of school meals is also that 30 million kids depend on school meals for their nutrition. And during the pandemic, there were universal free meals passed, which was a lifeline for America and for American families. And actually, now any kid can get a meal without stigma of like school lunch shaming, etc. And they're an increasing participation, and more children are starting to depend on school meals. So it's becoming an even more powerful platform to create nutrition security and fight food insecurity and hunger in America. And it's one of the most important safety nets. School lunches are one of the most important safety nets in our country. And I just pulled some food bank data, and it showed that for 2 months in a row, they've been seeing upticks in food in people going to the food bank, so up like 20% month over month. So, and then we know that there's a global food supply chain issue right now, and things are probably going to get worse than they're before they get better. And we really need to be doubling down on investing in school lunches and valuing how important they are to keeping our children safe.
Definitely. And I'm glad you touched on some of the health crises that we're dealing with in our youth. It's really astounding. And I don't think it can be overstated, the crisis that we're in. We've got childhood obesity and overweight rates increasing at alarming rates. The rates of obesity in kids doubled in COVID. From some of the research I was seeing on the CDC website, we've got rates of prediabetes going up in kids. And now we're finding that in some populations, a quarter of adolescents have prediabetes, a condition that we used to think of as only adult onset. We've got fatty liver disease in kids on the rise. And it's kind of incredible because, like you said, these are food related diseases, and 5 billion meals are going out to kids from schools. So it really does feel like there is a profound opportunity to link this metabolic disease epidemic in children that we're seeing. That, again, like you said, we need to sound the alarm bell way louder on, but link that with a really positive ability to impact this through this food delivery system that's already in place. And it's so amazing that EATReal is sort of at the intersection of these two crises. So paint a picture for us of like when EATReal gets involved, what does that look like with the school, and how do you help schools make transitions to healthier offerings?
I would love to dive into like how we work on it. Can I share a little bit about why we were started a little bit more?
Yes.
So we were founded by some leading doctors, pediatricians, and public health advocates that were passionate about really having an integrated approach to human and planet health. And actually, Dr. Leslie, who I know is an advisor, is one of our co-founders. And they were really passionate about getting to the root cause. Like they saw in the doctor's office what was happening, that kids were getting sick and sicker and sicker. And so they said, how do we upstream have upstream solutions? And they truly believe that real food is medicine for the most pressing challenges of our time. And so they I think also when we look at just the economic motivation, which some of the early supporters of our nonprofit were really passionate about the nonprofit's potential to be an economic solution, and that when, 3.8 trillion dollars is spent on healthcare, which is truly sick care. And so, and like over 75% of that has to do with processed food related diseases. So that's expensive. We're treating disease largely with pills, and other in medical intervention. Um, we're putting $3.8 trillion a year into that versus if we spend billions of dollars on healthy food upstream for kids so that they don't develop those metabolic diseases. And so that was really the motivation of looking at how do we upstream health solutions and give kids access to food as medicine early on so that then they can expand their health span, expand their lifespans. And we saw that pre-COVID, lifespan was on the decline, and the largest drivers were actually processed food related disease. So we saw that millennials are experiencing health shock. That's why I got involved. Millennials are experiencing health shock. They're the first generation in US history on track to have shorter lifespans than their parents. And so we felt like if we can stop health shock, you can stop that best by really making sure people have access and knowledge to real food early on. And so that was really the some of the biggest whys in terms of human health for why we wanted to do what we do.
Yeah, I mean it's so amazing. I think the reactive nature of our healthcare system, we're learning that it's an abject failure. The more money we've dumped into the healthcare system, the worse outcomes are getting. And in any other business or industry, if that were the case, we would radically be changing it. But healthcare somehow falls out of the sort of normal systems expectations, and it's as a physician, it's just shocking to me because you'd think that, okay, if as physicians or practitioners the goal is to keep people healthy or help people become healthy, but every year life expectancy is going down and our chronic disease epidemics are exploding, we need to go back to the drawing board. Like something's not working. And I think you and I both agree that one of the things that is not working is that we're not focusing on food and we're
Yeah,
not focusing upstream on what actually goes into the body to build the body and to generate health. And so I think it's incredible to hear how you and this team of founders and advisors are approaching this through that lens. And then I think what I'm so curious about is like how does this actually play out, like when you go to the schools and one thing I wrote about this in an article I published last year about the USDA's updated school lunch guidelines, and from where I stood, they were not good. They were moving in the wrong direction under the guise of this concept of increased flexibility for schools and
mm-hmm.
for students. They basically allowed for a lot more processing and packaged foods to come into the system. And so that was my take on things. So, I mean, I think, we're all up against some really entrenched large forces with large economic incentives to push processed food. So how does EATReal get into the mix with that? Dealing with we've got policy, we've got school boards, we've got the constraints of funding and budgeting and resources. Like how do you insert yourself into that milieu that is really challenging to affect change?
Totally agree. We think of the last 50 years as a processed food failed experiment. Just it didn't work, and let's all just acknowledge it, and then let's say how do we do things differently? Like just starting now. So processed food has gone up, sugar consumption has gone up, disease has gone up, climate change has accelerated. Like their strong correlation. So we have kind of a three-pronged approach. We do policy and advocacy, we do awareness building, and then we have a core program where we really deep dive into communities to transform the menu in public schools. And so I can talk a little bit about like what does it look like when we roll up our sleeves in a community, because it is game changing. And now let me tell you, school lunches are my favorite meal of the year. Like when I think of my favorite meals this year, school lunch, and it is possible. I literally dream of the heirloom beans that I had in at Vacaville Unified, for example. Yes, it is, or like the salad, the organic salad that's being grown in Morgan Hill Unified, or the Planet cuisine, the plant forward cuisine that's being grown in Mount Diablo Unified. Like there are amazing, delicious school lunches being served, and so it is possible. So what we do is we have a science-based approach where we have science-based sustainability and nutrition standards. So again, a very integrated approach. And we stand next to the food service directors who are really our champions of change. You've heard probably during the pandemic that school lunch heroes. Well, food service directors are actually the buyers of the food for their school districts. And so we really believe that these individuals, and there are many of them around the country who are total visionaries, are the ones that are the decision makers, and that they are the closest to their students. They're listening to what they need and want, and they have the ability to enroll their school board, their superintendents, the parents, everyone, to transform the menu. And so what we do is first we arm them with partnership. And so we really understand what are their goals, what are their visions for their program, what do they see today? And then we actually assess them. And so we have independent registered dietitians who assess the school district on our rigorous science-based nutrition and sustainability standards. And so we'll look at their menu, we'll look at where they're sourcing, we'll look at what oils they're using, we'll look at how much sugar is in things, we'll look at how local it is, who their suppliers are. Like they'll open up their books and they'll show us what their menus look like, and then we give them a report. It's usually like at least 14-page report. We're like, here's your rock. It's a report card. Here's where you're rocking it, and here are your opportunities. And then we decide with them, okay, what's the action plan? And we help them create their action plan. It's not us telling them what to do. It's them saying, I know my constraints, I know my challenges, I know the opportunities, I know my students, I know my suppliers. Like, here's where I want to start. And then we stand next to them and help them meet with suppliers, connect with new suppliers, meet with other school districts and tour their kitchens or hear about how they're getting chefs. And then we go through a multi-year process with them, and then we reassess them after they've made the changes to see if they can get EATReal certified.
Amazing. I think it's so optimistic to hear. I think it's really easy to stand back and kind of demonize everything and be like, oh, it's so bad across the board and it's all industry entrenched. But like to hear you talk and like really you are down on the ground with like the people, and the people have great intentions, and it's like you are working with them to empower visionary leaders to be able to actually like achieve their mission. Like I think it's such a good message to hear, because it can be easy to be pessimistic about what's happening in schools and like in school lunches and in the processed food sort of ecosystem. And so I love hearing that. And I would love to hear maybe some success stories, like that you were mentioning some of your favorite things like the beans. And it's so cool to hear. Like, I'd love to hear some success stories that you've had that have been really meaningful to you and really transforming a school food, system. And maybe also as like a follow-up question to that, like how you've seen children respond to the change in food, and if you've had any like takeaways around, again, there's pessimism around this. Kids won't eat healthy foods. Kids won't eat vegetables. Kids are so picky, this and that. But you've probably seen a lot more than most people with kids and diet. So I'd love to hear, yeah, some of these maybe some stories that have been particularly meaningful to you of where change is actually possible.
Yeah, kids are a tough crowd. As a mom of two, I know. And I think a lot of it's about, I want to start with a kids question. We can talk about
Yes,
cool examples,
please.
but like, partly why school lunch is my favorite is because I get to eat lunch with kids and see what lights them up. And our whole goal is help kids learn to love real food. So when I see them come alive with food, like, and that's what happens, that I get really, really inspired. And so but it is hard. And like, they're tough critics. And it can take so many times of exposure. Like it can take 15 times of trying something new to develop your taste buds for it and your palate. And so we'll see school districts that are like, I'm offering bok choy today, but I'm also going to offer it then every week for the next few weeks. And we're going to try to get some like different, we're going to serve it in different ways, and the kids are going to try it, and you see them like curious about it and maybe trying some of it, and then seeing what their friends are doing. And so it's really about exposure, I think. But what's cool is that we do have such a foodie culture in the United States and globally. I think with the rise of the Food Network, we have rising top chefs at schools. All like every kid is a top chef at this point, it feels like, and so it's really fun to watch them get really passionate about food. Or if you look at like what things are going viral on TikTok, like food is something that is so personal and is something that we interact with every day, and it can be so fun. And so the kids do start lighting up over it when they get a plant-based burger or they get a regenerative grass-fed burger, and it's like cooked from scratch. They had the whole sensory experience smelling it. They know they have a cool new chef that's doing cool things, and they're going through the school lunch line and there's maybe music playing, or and then they get to bite into that delicious meal that was lovingly prepared for them with passion. They are like, this burger is the bomb. Like that's a quote from a third grader. That was honestly what he thought. And then you just see them really enjoying it and having fun, and that it's a really positive part of their day. And that then when you ask them about it and how it helps that within the classroom, or they'll say like, I feel better, I don't have a tummy ache, or things like that, like it really matters to them and it gives them a boost. It's like good books or working breaks on a school bus. School lunches are key to a kid at having a successful happy day at school, and not being in the doctor's office or the nurse's office, or etc. And so like seeing the kids light up and love it is my favorite. Other wins in schools, there's so many that are happening. One of our school partners, Morgan Hill Unified, I was just there. They have an AI powered hydroponic container ship garden, that their vision is they want to grow an entire, in drought stricken California, they want to grow an entire organic salad for their students in these container ships, and they use 5 gallons of water, about a shower's worth of water. It's all grown within 10 miles of the schools and the students, so it's like harvested, and within 24 hours it's served to students. And they actually just hired Farmer Max, who's one of my favorite people. He's on TikTok. He loves lettuce, like seeing him how much he loves lettuce, and he's a graduate from that high school, and now he's growing the lettuce for the students. And so I think that that's just one example of how they're raising the bar, I think. And it's like having a lead farmer who's has a farm on campus that's growing a huge portion of the menus. Like that is farm to table. That's like Chez Panisse, or like it's like name the best restaurant in the United States and they're trying to do it. So it's really, there are tons of examples like that that are happening throughout the country.
Okay, that is so fascinating, because what's really jumping out to me is how much there's this like needing to understand the psychology of the kids to really get them to adopt this. Like the fact that they might eat something or be more prone to eat something if it's going viral on TikTok, or like if there's great music playing and the chef is really fun and engaged about it. And that there's actually that you're actually seeing this type of body awareness come into it as well, where the kids are actually reporting that they feel better after having this healthier food. That's all, I think, really interesting takeaways for parents too, of like, how to get the kid on board and sort of get them invested in the process. And then of course, like with the hydroponic farm, which is so cool, I mean, that's got to be really light kids up as well, in terms of just like the novelty of it and how kind of interesting it is. And I think
Totally.
that,
The
yeah, yeah,
that same
please.
that same school has these mini farms, pork farms inside. They're in science classrooms, but then they were also in the lunchroom, and it was pajama day. It was the cutest thing ever. Everyone was there, so it was PJ day, and they had the school salad bar line, and all the kids went through, and it had in Spanish and English the types of vegetables they were, what they were, information about the colors of them. Sometimes we see them talk about vitamins and or where they're from, and sometimes they mix in stuff from the school garden, which then the kids are really proud. But then these first graders went back and sat down, and then they opened up these, kind of think of them as like mini pop-up farms or like fridge farms, where you like can open it and there's different, in this case it was lettuce growing, and the food service director took it out, Michael, and he said, who wants to try this? And no hand went up. And at first it was like, ooh, because they had pulled out this lettuce with the roots, and they probably only seen lettuce leaves. And then all of a sudden, one kid raised their hand and they tried it, and then all the other kids looked at them. And I think this is like, make it communal, make it community, whether it's at school, make it together. Or at home. And then after that one kid, all eyes were on that kid and they were trying it. Then every single hand shot up, and we ate through all the lettuce together. They were so pumped about this lettuce. And so it can, like, the lunchroom can be the best classroom in America. And it needs to be, because it can solve our greatest challenges. It can solve climate change, and it can solve our health pandemic, and it can solve like help pandemic proof us in the future. And so we really think it's an important call to action to have all eyes on how do we redesign our food system with our children at the center, and use schools as a platform to
Mm.
start there.
I love that. It takes just one to make it cool, and then that is like the domino effect. And one question I have for you, because you're on the ground, you're a lot closer to kids. Um, do the kids do they have an interest in the health aspect of food? Of like, food can either make me healthy and feel good, or it's gonna make me feel bad and down and this and that. Like, do those connections come through, and is that a motivator, or is it really more the social aspect that you feel like is the driver? But I'd just be curious on your perspective on that. Do you see kids taking an interest in the health or environmental side of this?
I think in the health, we're starting to, and also when you get the PE teachers involved, and from a sports and performance perspective, yes, 100% yes. And so that's really been interesting, is to when we partner with different organizations that are doing that more, or roll up curriculum through that way, or we get sports leaders involved. We have a new professional soccer player who's getting involved in the movement. And so when we have it from they do understand that food can fuel them to feel better and to perform, especially in sports. I feel like it's a big motivator. And so I think that might be kind of like the first aha, but we're starting to see kids put it together. I mean, kids are wicked smart from like so early on. As a mom with a three-nager, like they do put it together. My three-nager puts it together. So I think yeah, kids do put it together, and they especially, I think it's particularly motivational for sports and performance. So yes.
That's great to hear. And again, another interesting takeaway of like, how do you position it? Like, maybe it's not avoiding prediabetes that they are super caring about, but is it going to make them better on the basketball court? Like, speak their language, like,
Yes.
food can do this for you. And so I love that. I'm going to tuck that one away for when I have kids one day. But you had we talked about the hydroponics a little bit. And you also mentioned, like, this is a part of the beauty of this food-based approach, is that it can heal bodies, it can heal the climate, it can make us also more pandemic proof. Can you speak to how the climate side of this and the farming and agriculture side of this fits into your mission? Because I think some people might think like, gosh, school lunches, regenerative farming, like, how does this all relate? But I'd love to hear the framework for how you're thinking through all this stuff.
Yeah. So in terms of health, we talked about food is processed food related disease is the number one driver of shortened health span and lifespan. So it's super like it's super obvious why we focus there, why our solution works on attacks that right problem. And then from a climate perspective, just about a quarter of greenhouse gas emissions comes from our food system. And when we look at other areas of our foods or of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, there's more momentum. Like there's more acceleration in terms of electrification and some of the other sectors. So a lot of people think that food is underinvested in. And today, like 2% of global giving goes, philanthropic global giving goes to fighting climate change. So just generally, climate change is underinvested. Um, and and I would add it's underinvested, but I think like we talked about what's the motivators for kids. Kids care. Climate anxiety is on the rise. Like the Greta effect. Kids want to feel like they're doing something and that they're saving the planet. Like they're actually stressed out and really worried and having mental health issues around it. Like climate anxiety became a word in the dictionary, and it is so on the rise. So kids really, really care about climate change. And one of the best ways that they can take action is through their food. So fixing school lunch and school breakfast, and making that more climate smart, gives them a way to take action every single day. And I think when it comes to climate change, like I said, that this is 25%, about just like 23% of greenhouse gas emissions. But it's one where we have the power to individually take action and to advocate for changing our food system, so that everyone has access to healthy, regenerative options. And really, there are so many ways. I think when we look at Paul Hawken, gave us a quote of support for our nonprofit and for all the work that we're doing within climate change. And for him, I think what he was saying is like how it is about regeneration. And when you look at how do we not just sustain our planet as is, because it's not healthy right now, we actually need to regenerate and heal our planet. And so our food, and doing that through the soil and the food that's grown, the majority of food is grown in soil, and our soil can actually sequester carbon and fight climate change. And it's right, literally a climate solution right beneath our feet. And and it's so powerful. And the win-win, National Geographic just did a piece of that. If you can create healthier soil and healthier microbes in the soil, it actually creates more nutrient density in the food that you're growing. So you can, it's true, like our food is one of the most powerful climate solutions out there, and it's one that we interact with so many times a day.
Absolutely. And I think that that article you posted, I believe on your LinkedIn from National Geographic was really fascinating and basically showing that fruits and vegetables today are less nutritious than they used to be. So even if you're making that incredible effort to eat the whole foods and the fruits and vegetables and the beans and legumes and the nuts and seeds and all these things, if you are eating them out of conventional soil that have been basically processed through modern farming practices that damage the soil, you're getting way less bang for your buck. And so we're just shortchanging ourselves by the way that we're interacting with the soil. So I'd love to
Yeah.
hear
Oh,
about
and
how. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, and Dr. Boyana on our philanthropic leadership board, I will always stick with me. But she said, not only are you getting maybe less nutrient dense, but also you could be getting, with conventional methods, you are unknowingly likely getting a side of pesticides. And so now, whenever like serving my kids food or whatnot, I'm like imagining an invisible side of pesticides if it's not, if I'm not trying to, if for some reason we couldn't try to buy organic that day or regenerative and whatnot. So that one made me sick to my stomach. So
Yeah, less nutrients to the side of pesticides, which are like, can be neurotoxic and can impact our microbiome. It's great. It sounds delicious.
yeah,
It's unbelievable.
serve
And
that right to our kids. Yeah.
yeah,
Anyway.
love it. Yeah. And we wonder why, we have this monumentally rising chronic disease epidemic. And then of course we think that all these kids just need pills to fix these things. So we're I think we're both on the same page about working to change that kind of narrative. And I think that I'd be curious to hear how Eat Real is involved with the regenerative organic agriculture movement. Like how is that play into the system change that you guys are working on with schools, and how do you interact with farms? I know you said right before you started you just came from a regenerative farm, so I'd love to hear like what that intersection looks like for Eat Real, and how you see more broadly schools interacting with the farming system to create this really synergistic harmony.
Yeah, I love it. So when we look at top climate solutions within our food system and within schools, usually what rises to the top are reduced food waste. 40% of food is wasted. So let's reduce food waste. At home is important. Everyone can try to reduce food waste at home, but at schools, which is an institution and is so huge in terms of volume, it's massive. So they can source imperfect produce. They can, or seconds. They can make the food super delicious so that the kids eat as much as possible of that serving, and don't put it in the trash. And if they, instead of putting it in the trash, put it in compost, and have that compost go back to the school garden, or go back to the farmer and have it be a more closed loop who grew their food. And so we think that reducing food waste is huge, and our program supports that. We think adding more plant-based options in general, there was one study like 1% of 14-year-old girls got the daily recommended amount of fruits and vegetables. And so we're not getting enough plants in general, and plants feed, which I'm sure we'll talk about. I'm sure I would love to chat with you about gut microbiome in a second, but how we need to be feeding ourselves plants and feeding our microbiome plants, and more of them. So more plants, that's more salad bars, that's more plant powered options, etc. That's more fruits and vegetables. That's that bok choy or those beans. Like that is getting just more, eating more, having more plant powered, looking at our plate and having as much as possible be plant powered. Uh, and those are two major changes in terms of environmental. And then the other one that we work with is like, in which people can apply in their individual life and then also at schools, is like know your farmer, source locally when possible, source seasonally, source regenerative. And regenerative organic is kind of a hot term right now, but it's really, really, really important because regenerative organic is the type of farming where they actually are able to sequester the most carbon, and it is like when you look at types of farming, it is the most powerful in terms of mitigating climate change. And that so we help them source regenerative, certified, and transitioning to regenerative farms that integrate those practices of no-till and um, uh, there are so many practices that I could get into, but we have schools sourced from regenerative sources, and so we're just on a regenerative farm. We had a regenerative farm summit. Jennifer Siebel Newsom, first partner of California, who's a big supporter, incredible supporter of the farm to school movement. She was on the farm with us. Executives from the California Department of Food and Agriculture, top chef winner David Tu, who's like Chef Tu, who's just one of the most inspiring people ever. He was on the farm with us. And then we had school leaders from across, in this case, it was a California summit. We are a national nonprofit, but we had school leaders from across California who represented $130 million of buying power, 400 schools, like 275,000 students. And I've been getting updates from all of them about like they're starting to buy more regenerative egg. I put in an order here. My June menu is having regenerative products on it. So we're, in addition to like working deep dive one-on-one with schools, we're trying to have summits where we do farm tours and education, and we're like here, I could see us doing, we just did this regenerative farm tour. Next we could do food waste tour. We're like learning about compost, and then we could do a plant-based session. And so we are all about these platforms of education to inspire the leaders, and that's everywhere from government to policymakers to decision makers at schools to families and students and chefs.
Wow. Okay, you mentioned a number there I wanted to circle back on, which was the number of like the buying power in the room. What was
Yeah,
that number that you mentioned?
$130 million a year of buying power, purchasing power on the
For school
for
food.
school meals, just school meals. Yeah.
And just to drill into that a little bit more, like who are those people? Is it the school administrators who are in charge of buying the food for the school, or who is that group that is making these decisions?
Yeah, so there are a lot of key stakeholders involved in a community. The food service director or the nutrition director wears a cape. It's like
Okay.
they are the champion. And so everyone on Teacher Appreciation Day, write your food service director and nutrition director a note, get to know them, like thank them. They are the ones that are the buyers, and then they get the usually the chief business officer, the superintendent, the school board. They work in the PTA. They work with a lot of other people, but they are the change agent in our model.
Amazing. Okay, so that's really interesting. And in your experience, have you found that this type of awareness and education building and really forging relationships with these stakeholders that's been an effective way of getting people to kind of move towards regenerative buying and things like that? Because what's coming to mind for me is like this sounds really expensive. Like if there's only a dollar and change per student per day, and they have to meet budgets and this and that, like how to triangulate all the different factors that they're trying to, and they also have to meet, I'm sure, like certain USDA requirements for
Totally.
what goes into the food. So how is that working in terms of making this uh squaring the circle or whatever that
Yeah,
saying is
yeah,
to,
yeah.
yeah, to work for everyone?
Their jobs are so complicated. They're navigating all those things that you just mentioned. So what's really exciting is that we are collecting a lot of data that shows that there's actually a business case for real food, and that it's actually a better business model to invest in real versus processed food, like real scratch cooked, delicious, culturally relevant, sustainable food, for multiple reasons. And I'm going to talk about micro and then macro. So at an individual school district level, they're actually tasked with being profit centers, which I think is strange. Like, what, the teachers aren't tasked with making money off like off of their classrooms. Like, our lunchroom should be an investment and is like critically important to our kids, but they are tasked with being profit centers, or at least breaking even. And if they're profit centers, then they take that investment and then they can do things like build a kitchen or a central kitchen or a warehouse or hire another chef, or etc., or farmer max. But they are tasked with being profit centers. The business case that we're seeing is that as they have invested in real food and raised the bar through our program, their customers, students and parents who support their kids eat the lunch, uh, they want to participate. And so they look at something called participation. So we're seeing that as schools invest in real food, their participation numbers go up, their reimbursement goes up. They're able to upskill some of their staff and create efficiency and engage their staff, and their staff gets higher wages as well. But they're able to invest in their food program, but see overall revenue and profit even increase. And so there's actually a business case that we're going on a roadshow with, and that's why we have a multi-year wait list for our program, because school food service directors are telling their friends, like, this works, this is working. There's a business case to be made, and that's at a micro or like individual community level. At a macro, there are multiple true cost of food analysis studies and meta studies, and one showed that for every dollar that's invested in school meals, there's $2 of benefits. And that's looking at poverty reduction, because it offers a safety net to families, and then also in healthcare, and what we're talking about in terms of healthcare spend. And so that is really, really strong ROI in terms of, it is an investment, but there's return on that investment. And that's not even talking about all the individual, the happier and healthier kid that's able to focus and learn and grow and thrive. So
Oh my God. I'm so excited to hear that because, yeah, it's like it does need to come, and that does need to fit with the bottom line, for this to be, I feel like, really scalable. And to hear that you're having emerging data that it does. So it's really working for everyone, like, gives me so much hope that this could really scale, and that's like just so impressed by the work you're doing to figure out this information, work with all the key stakeholders, and then, like you said, go on a roadshow to make sure that people know this, that it's going to align with their different priorities. So that's so cool. And you started talking there at the end about a topic that I want to shift gears to, which is that in terms of the return on investment, one of the returns is that, like, the kids are happier and, like, doing better. And so this, I think, brings up an interesting topic around the relationship between food and mental health. And one of the mediators of that we know is the microbiome. And so I'd be curious to hear. Uh, one thing, I mean, I've been reading a lot about recently is just that rates of things like ADHD and attention disorders, like, that are definitely going to affect students and teachers, like, they're on the rise, and there's more and more emerging evidence that there's a relationship between some of these conditions and dietary quality, and that microbiome might be a link. So I'd love for you to maybe break down for the listeners, like, um you know your take on this relationship, and how the program Eat Real, like, is sort of, again, like, triangulating this sort of, like, gut function, student health, metabolic and mental, and then the sort of better farming practices and sourcing better quality food for students.
yeah, and there's a lot of early evidence. I'll kind of like talk through it with you, as I think we're both like digesting it. Sorry, pun intended. I'm Minnesota, digesting it all. But so I think I've been just fascinated with all the science that's coming out around the gut brain connection. And I think a lot of times I grew up thinking, like, there's your brain and there's your gut, and they're two separate things. And we're seeing that's an interconnected highway, and that, like, a lot of ways, our guts are our second brain, and like, or maybe they're, it's all one part of one brain, and then they think together. And so there's so much emerging that we still don't know and don't understand. I showed my daughter the magic school bus ride, but I like want to take a magic school bus ride like through my whole body right now, of like to really see the latest on the connections between the brain and the gut health. And there's so much coming out. I think what's really interesting is there was just a Nature study I posted about it, but talking about BGM, uh, brain gut microbiome. But as someone who's really passionate about that, just the idea of this like brain gut microbiome as one interconnected super highway system, is super interesting. And so I think what's interesting is that the nature piece that was analyzing numerous studies was talking about how there's early evidence that dietary intervention helps solve for some of the conditions that we think of as not gut conditions, that actually we think of as like the psychiatric conditions, brain disorders, etc. And so that is like, there's the early evidence is that nutrition can be an intervention. And so like we're like, hey, okay, well, let's make nutrition an intervention as early as possible before kids need a prescription. And it can, and also like how can it be a part of it, like when you see it, when anyone sees a therapist, how can they also be talking about their sleep and their diet and like right away, so that it can be a really holistic approach to intervention. I think I hear parents, and friends, like really worried about the rise of depression, and because of the pandemic intensified that. But even the Surgeon General in December, is like calling it, I don't know if he quite called it an emergency, but in so many words, we are really worried about the mental health, of our kids. So anything we can do, we should be doing. And the early indications are that and nutrition can be an intervention for depression, anxiety, autism. Like these are things that parents are super worried about right now and are hyper vigilant and aware of. And so I think that if we can start to do more studies and more research and have more tools like levels, that we're getting more and more data and information, and then we can really start to have a stronger approach to these concerns, and that are so integrated with how our gut health and our brain health.
Yeah, it's tragic to think about the suffering that's happening, and that the pandemic really accelerated in terms of these mental health issues in children. And I think that yeah, for those of us who are kind of deep in this space about food as medicine, and thinking about things like the microbiome and the impact on the brain, um, it just kind of seems like a no-brainer of like, if we can get more nutrients to kids' bodies and brains, like the multifarious positive effects that it can have on just general day-to-day performance, but also potentially on mental health issues. Like it's one of the levers we've got to pull. It's not the only one. There's so many other things also involved, but it's so foundational. I mean, this is what our bodies are built out of. And food is also what the microbiome eats to thrive, propagate, and do their work, which is so important to our brain. So I think it's exciting how the like very scientific research on the brain gut microbiome axis, or the gut brain axis, is sort of happening and coinciding with the regenerative agriculture movement, and also a better understanding of just more generally food as medicine, because it feels like we're in this really exciting moment right now where there's synthesis and integration of many of the biggest problems we're facing today, and realizing it's almost like I focus on systems biology and medicine. What are the links and the root causes between lots of diseases? But this is like the systems approach to global problems, not just body problems, but
Oh,
global problems. And I think it's the way we've got to be thinking. So we stop playing whack-a-mole with all these different epidemics and think about like what's going to help all of them. And it's like real food, clean real food. It's going to help a
yeah,
lot of these
yeah.
these problems. So it feels like Eat Real is just like so in the middle of that, and it's so amazing. Yeah.
It's definitely my dream job. I love every day. I feel like I like am so excited to work. I love getting to work on this, and it is a truly scalable solution. And and then we get into the awareness building, and then we can all come together, like whether it's conversations like this or campaigns that we can do together, all like brands and individuals and everybody, thought leaders, influencers, and then the policy and the advocacy shift. I think between all the different ways we're all tackling it, and we're all also personally, I think, getting more involved. Like, I don't think people thought about processed food related disease. That wasn't really a word that people were talking about, or metabolic health, like that. I don't remember people talk. I mean, doctors, yes, you were talking about that, but other people weren't. Or inflammation or IBS, like these are, it's like people that are starting to are. I think also maybe that's one silver lining of COVID is like we have never been more aware of our health. We've also like never felt less in control, I think. So how do we like take this moment of awareness and then help people take easy actions and then systemic actions to make changes?
One question I have on that sort of systems level issue is, you know, one book I really love is well, I love all Rob Lustig's books, and Metabolic talks about this a lot, but Mark Hyman's book Food Fix, which goes into a lot of detail about these systems level issues and how basically like the processed food industry is like intent on getting their product in front of kids and through schools as one of those mechanisms. And also just, I mean, if you walk through any sort of conventional grocery store, it's like it is just a direct conduit of this processed food to people in the most appealing packaging and cheapest prices, because like it's supported by the farm bills and it's partially subsidized, and it's like we're up against so much in terms of the processed food industry. And in some ways, I mean, I think there are some issues within the USDA in terms of just interests that are misaligned. I've written about this a little bit with the, like I mentioned, the school lunch changes that happened a year or two ago, and then also they recently ignored their scientific advisory board's advice about reducing the total sugar consumption per day, and kept it at a higher percentage, even though their medical reviewers said not to do that. And so,
Yeah. And there
how
are
do you?
no sugar standards in schools. So kids get like one analysis 4 times the amount of sugar they're supposed to get in the entire day. They can get in just breakfast and banana
Yes.
breakfast. So
So can you
it like,
speak
yeah, that's
yeah, can you speak a little bit to like that? Like what like how do we affect change? What is your way of thinking about how we're going to ultimately change things on the biggest levels, like influencing the processed food industry, making it work for them too to get on board with this? Because I don't think, to me, it seems impossible to like overpower that. I mean, this is trillions of dollars of sort of interest, but how do we work together to like make this work without just fighting them the whole
yeah.
time? How do you think
Well,
through
this
that?
is where this individual piece does, like, mostly I think it's a system change, but in an individual, like, every purchase does matter, every bite does matter. So if you can have though that reflect your values whenever possible, and like and be part of the solution, the business responds to that. So consumer demand is super powerful. I watched it with the fair trade movement that I helped grow from niche to mass. And really, when we focus on inspiring consumers, then they would say, like, the conscious rise of the conscious consumer, they would say, I want people first were like, what's fair trade, free trade? I don't need that. And then they're like, no, I need fair trade coffee. Like, that's actually my consumer values. And then it started to be table stakes for any company. They needed to up their bar. So I do think consumers, if you have a favorite product, help like writing to them, posting on social media, like get active and get involved, and then find your and then put halos around your regenerative farmer. Like, it's not all that you eat, but like one, your favorite lettuce or something like this from Frog Hollow Farm or whatever. Just like use social media, use the tools that you have, like have that be part of your messaging as an individual. I think that businesses will respond to consumer demand. I've seen it happen, so I do think that there's something there. But I think there is a big money and vested interest in keeping things status quo and keeping this ship that's hurting our kids and hurting our planet going in the direction that it's going. So to right that ship, we need to be super organized and collaborative. We believe in building coalitions. So like our nonprofit will partner with 200 other nonprofits, for like to help support universal free meals, for example. Or there are a bunch of nonprofits right now that are coming together to think about the farm bill. And the farm bill is something that like is every 5 years comes up. for renewal. And so it's I think that is and that and when you the farm bill for people that aren't familiar with it, I think that that is one where that yes, individuals can do things, but we can all come together as nonprofits, as people that want to join campaigns and whatnot, and advocate for innovation on the farm bill. The farm bill is what subs is actually it's interesting. I was like uh, thinking about it a lot, and it was founded during like the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl. But we have an economic situation now, and we have the like an issue similar issues that we did then in terms of environmental collapse and economic challenges and health challenges. And so the farm bill is designed is supposed to be a solution to that. And so we think that a bunch of people all coming together to advocate for a better design of the farm bill, and the farm bill is what funds SNAP, nutrition assistance, and commodity subsidies. Like right now, we're subsidizing corn, sugar, wheat, soy, things that go into processed food disease. The Farm Bill funds SNAP, and the number one item in 2011, at least, and couldn't find this last year's data, but was um, corn syrup based sodas. So, like the Farm Bill right now is funding traditional conventional monocrop agriculture versus all the things that we were just talking about of like real, whole, delicious, more plants, etc. It's the Farm Bill hasn't quite caught up to what consumers and students are demanding right now. And so we think that there's a really cool opportunity to innovate and that our legislators can make changes there. And so I think that it needs to be a top priority and something that people think about as they're voting in their elected officials who are going to vote on the farm bill.
Yes, yes, yes. I would love to maybe even as someone who personally has taken a great interest in the farm bills, and something that really I remember reading a report on farm bills, like the actual report of where the study's funding is going to, and I think I recall that $31 billion was going towards commodity crop subsidies, and that's like all the things you mentioned, disease promoting foods, most of which are turned. It's not like this is soybeans that are going to like edamame in the frozen section. It's like they're going towards processed seed oils and other things that are unhealthy. And then there was this small section of the farm bill that's the horticulture, like little subset. And that's where there's like a little carve out for funding for like basically vegetables and legumes and nuts and things like
Yeah.
that. And if you
It's like
look at the
specialty crop. It's really
specialty
small
crops,
too.
yeah. And it's like if
Or
you look at
7% conservation. It's like, okay, well, how if if you look at the pie or
the
the
pie
yeah.
chart is a joke. Like it's like, wait. The huge part of the pie chart should be fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, spices, etc. Like the things that will make us healthy. And it's like it's like there's the land, there's the farmers. Let's support the things that make people healthy. Like it seems
Yeah.
like a no brainer. So it'd be interesting to hear like how do people actually speak up to tell their legislator that they want this to happen? Like, what's even the right language to use? And are there
Yeah.
organizations that can help?
So the one thing just to touch on the farm bill really quick because I have been like nerding out on that and whiteboarding and like being like sitting back and how could this work and what would it look like just like in my free time, you know. So
Same.
I yeah, right, I know. So uh so when you look at that pie chart, and like SNAP is super important that we're um funding that nutrition assistance because that is such a safety net in America. And how do you make it so that, you know, sodas isn't the number one thing purchased? Like how do you incentivize things like there are really cool programs like buck programs that Wholesome Wave and others are promoting, where you know, if you're using SNAP dollars, then you can get $2 for every dollar spent on fruits and veggies. You can get two. It's worth two actually. So if you buy those things. And so there's some really cool incentives and tests that have been going on that can be scaled and incorporated into the farm bill so that it prioritizes more plants and more nutrient density and more of the things that are going to heal people and the planet. And so I think that that's, and then looking at, okay, well, these other pieces of the pie, what else is there? Like, how does it go towards regenerative practices? How does it go towards um, like supporting a lot of diverse stakeholders and BIPOC farmers and a lot of um, also like new training and education. Like there's a lot of things that we could like put it under a magnifying glass and really improve it. And to answer your question of, okay, well, how do people get involved? People, we haven't been posting that much about it yet, but we will be. So people can like go to eatreal.org and go check out our newsletter. And I think we'll be pointing, there are some really good coalitions that are emerging right now. So we will also be sharing what other coalitions people can sign up for news about it on.
Incredible. Okay, great. And we'll link all those resources for sure in the show notes here. One thing we touched a little bit on is this pandemic proofing the next generation and how nutrition plays into that. And you co-authored with Rob Lustig, one of our levels advisors, and one of my personal heroes, this incredible PDF like report on the Eat Real website that was about how processed food related diseases are directly contributing to the majority of underlying conditions that basically lead to worse COVID outcomes. So, I'd be interested to hear, more insight around this, like what you've learned, and yeah, just paint the landscape for like how you think real food could actually change the way we potentially face the lingering tail of COVID, but also any future pandemic that will
Yeah.
inevitably come down the road.
Yeah, lingering tail, and it seems like we're in another spike. I just saw New York City's alert go up. So, um, so this is like a long marathon, and yeah, there may be more. So, how do we pandemic proof our society? We've been thinking about that a lot. Our Yes, Dr. Lustig and I published this, and Chef Dominique Kren actually helped us launch it because she's so passionate about real food as medicine, and it's on our website and on the alerts and insights on eatreal.org. And really, our call to action was, look, there are important government policies that are in place right now and vaccines weren't even available yet, but like there were, the government was encouraging different interventions, and they weren't mentioning nutrition. It was just left out, and we felt like that was a dangerous and lethal omission. And so we wanted to say, that like real food has the power to help people have functioning immune systems so that they can, if exposed to COVID, they can have a normal immune response, a strong, like a healthy and an overactive immune response. And so that was why we wrote it. So what's interesting is we did a bunch of data analysis, and we found that in the beginning of COVID, this was like October in 2020, that 80% of New York City deaths had at least one comorbidity that was a processed food related disease. And then we also saw that if someone had their insulin spiked, that it actually this like blew my mind, that it actually created more coding for the virus to enter the cells, and then it held the door open for the virus to enter. So it actually increased insulin, and even from like short-term exposure to processed food, actually cause an increase in severity, complications, hospitalizations, and death. And like, so immediately, like what we're eating and how we're fueling ourselves is impacting our ability to not be super impacted by COVID. And that has to do with like what we have access to. That's where like, let's make sure that people have access to meals at school, etc., and healthy meals wherever they are, so that we can have a strong, resilient society. And so, like that, we're thinking like, how can people ring the bell on that?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that was maybe most disturbing to me about the entire pandemic was that it almost became controversial to talk about food as something we could do to like improve our resilience against the virus. It's like almost like people would consider some of that like pseudoscience because it wasn't what was coming from the CDC. And even though there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of scientific papers showing things like, oh, if you're deplete in these micronutrients, you have a higher risk, or we know that these comorbidities are directly related to outcomes, and we know these comorbidities are processed food related, somehow saying that if you replace your processed food intake with real food, you may have better COVID outcomes. Like that was controversial to say. And I saw people getting slammed on this, like, on social. And it is the most perplexing thing.
Still getting slammed. Still getting
Yeah.
slammed. So
It, it's,
yeah.
it's, it's, I mean, it's absolutely perplexing. Like, it's like, are you kidding? I mean, it makes me, this is like what keeps me up at night. Like, how do you connect these dots for people such that it's like, this is fairly obvious. Like, if processed food is leading to these diseases and these diseases are worsening our COVID outcomes, and we understand all the scientific mechanism, a lot of the scientific mechanisms of why these comorbidities lead to worse COVID outcomes, like the one that you just mentioned, then let's try and clean up these issues by using food as a way to
Yeah.
reverse them. So
Yeah,
yeah, same
and
page.
what's powerful is like the UCSF study that showed that if you switch to real food and get off processed food, like, and if you're able to, and it's hard, it's complicated, so like it's not the individual, it's this is a systemic issue. So, but as people are able to have access to that real food, within 10 days you can transform your metabolic health. Like within 10 days you can have a more functioning better functioning immune system. Like we can literally make ourselves and our societies and our communities more resilient against this current spike, again, because when we wrote that, we were like 200,000 deaths. We're about to be at 1 million. Like this is loss for people. And so I think that it's really critical that we start to think about it now, and that we take it seriously now, in the middle of this, and right now in this spike, like in the next 10 days, and then also going forward. And then I think also I think people, I think a lot about how the food companies and pharma and the established industries are make it really nutrition really confusing. That's why I love the concept of levels. And I'm not where I want, but so I'm not involved, but I just like love the concept of it, because as people know and gain insight, they're able to take more action. But I think this is becoming so personal for people. Like the pandemic has affected everybody. And it, I think the pandemic has affected everyone, but I think people are starting to see it impact their friends and families at an accelerated rate, just processed food related disease, not even thinking about the pandemic, just like, and the big pharma and big ag, et cetera, have made it confusing to us, and big food. And like diabetes, even the name, like we talk a lot about how do we rename diabetes, like it's, and that's why we're like, let's just call it all processed food disease and call it what it is, because calling it diabetes or not talking about how processed food can actually, and sugar can feed cancer, like people don't know. We like literally nutritional intelligence and this stuff is made confusing on purpose to us to keep us doing these things. And so I'm like, how do we break it down for people? And I'm still learning, and I'm still asking a lot of questions so that I can help break it down, because it's still made to be really confusing. And so how do we get the data and the information and make it really clear that real food is one of the brightest solutions for healing ourselves, our families, and the world.
Amen. Oh, I mean, yes,
Yeah,
yes, all the
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes, yes. And I'm so happy to be connected so that we can, like you said, it's all about coalition building and so much about awareness as well. And so I'm happy we're having these conversations. To end on just a sort of happy, positive note, I think that I was reading about this rainbow taco challenge you guys did with students, and I think because we have a lot of listeners who are parents and always looking for ways to get their kids excited about healthy eating. Can you talk about just this challenge and how kids kind of respond to this type of fun, interactive food experiences?
yeah. So first, I guess I won't barely like what we learned from this was like, make it fun, like turn on the music, make it colorful, and do it together. I think those are like, if you can have one, a couple meals a week, like even just like do it together, have fun, put on the music, and make it colorful. Like that is what we are seeing time and time again, whether it's in a school lunch setting or whether it's at home, etc. Like that gets people. Food makes us all become more alive. It can, and so have fun with it and make it a priority. And it's everyone's time crunch. So just even once a week, have that experience. Make it an experience together, and make it and focus on it, and it can be really really powerful. So what we did was we do different really cool challenges. And so if, like I said, if people follow us at EATReal certified on social, you'll be invited and challenged. So challenge serve. So what we did was we partnered with the incredible team at IDEO at the beginning of the pandemic, and they're amazing. We love them. And within 3 weeks, I think it was two, we did a sprint where we did a design sprint, and we designed a rainbow taco challenge that went totally viral. It had like 20 million in potential reach. And the whole idea was people were starting to be stuck, people were at home and they wanted to take control of their health, and they like were looking for fun things to do. And so we launched on, it was mostly on Instagram. TikTok was just coming out, like just on the rise at that point, but mostly on Instagram. And so we got top chefs and athletes and influencers and tons of students and tons of parents and everyone. That whole idea was called the Rainbow Taco Challenge, and the Rainbow Taco Challenge got people. It was simple. It was like, and we that was the whole thing. Keep it really simple. We're like, okay, like let's cook colorfully together. Like let's cook colorful foods, like as many different vegetables, etc. And we saved it on our Instagram so people can go and check it out if they wanted some food inspiration, some rainbow taco inspirations. We still make rainbow tacos at my house a lot. And so the whole idea was like cook rainbow, delicious, colorful, nutrient dense foods together, and then challenge your friends. And we were also trying to get extra meals to families, so we did it as a fundraiser, and so it was a lot of fun. And we've done other challenges. We did a no added sugar challenge, a 7-day no added sugar challenge with all the YMCA's of California. That was so awesome, and we'll be doing some more fun challenges coming up.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so challenge for everyone listening.
Yeah,
Rainbow
rainbow
tacos
tacos.
this week,
Tag
as
us.
many colors as possible.
Yeah, with the music on, make it fun. Do it together. Yes.
Make it fun. Oh, I love that. It really brings up so many memories for me of, now having a lot of friends who have young children, and I'm so obsessed with cooking and plant-based cooking and color and all these things. Like when I get to go to their houses, the first thing I want to do with my friends' young kids who are like, 3, 4, 5 years old is cook with them, because it's exactly like you said. It can be a party. We blast their favorite music. They get to choose on Spotify what we listen to. We get out all the colorful things from the fridge. I give them knives, which their parents hate me for, but it's like, I
Yeah, my
bought
3-year-old used her butter knife to cut her strawberries. So yep.
exactly. And I've got a favorite. I think this was a Kelly LeVeque recommendation, but like a plastic knife that's serrated. You can't hurt yourself, but you can cut through vegetables. And so they get a special tool. It's colorful. They're on a step stool. And then the other thing that's been really fun is I give them the basics, like depending on the age, and then kind of let them go. So, like, if we're making a pesto together, like they get to choose how much of a handful of nutritional yeast and cashews, and picking recipes where they kind of can't screw it up. So they get to own the portion, like how much is, and it's like I have seen two things have come of that. And one is that it's built my relationship with these kids, I think, in a really special way because they feel like they are being treated like an adult. And two, they are so much more likely to eat the food when they have had an involved in taking responsibility for it. And so it makes me, honestly, those experiences have made me actually even more excited to be a parent one day, because I'm like, I think it's going to be a challenge, of course, because there's a lot of cultural forces that make it difficult, but also it can be a really, really, really fun thing. And so that's just like, I may be really optimistic because, of course, I'm just popping in for like one day here and there with these families. But I think it can be, like you said, it can be so, so fun when you bring this type of like colorful, fun energy to it. So I love that. I love ending on that note. And if you have anything else you want to share with listeners before we end, the floor is yours. Any calls to action or any final points? Would love to hear anything you'd like to share.
I love that you do that. I think that is so awesome, by the way, with your friends' kids. And I will say, like, those are my favorite days with my family. And actually, we do once in a while, not all the time, but we do like special Saturday pancakes. But of course, we're trying to do them like, okay, how do we use really nutrient dense ingredients and things from the garden, etc. And like that, and seeing my daughter say, "I am chef" at 3, and take control and wear her little apron and whatnot is like, and then tell me to mom, don't forget yours, and just tell me what to do in the kitchen. It's like those are definitely my favorite days. So I love that. I think in terms of what to do, uh, I think just stay passionate. I think people that are listening right now are probably really passionate. So like keep being passionate and nerding out. I think join the conversation. We would love for people to get involved with us on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. If people want to, I like posting. I want to hear what you think about the different things where we're discovering and that we're seeing on social media, on our websites. Definitely our newsletter shares a lot of resources, and we're going to be sharing a lot about the different coalitions and whatnot. And doing a lot more video as well. So stay passionate, join the conversation. You can join our conversation at eatreal.org. We, of course, need support. So we fund all of our work to work with schools. So we have incredible angel donors, corporate partners, more government support, which is exciting to make these changes. But we fund all of our work with schools so that they can then buy higher quality ingredients, pay for chefs, etc. So we have a big wait list, and we're trying to let as many schools off of our wait list right now as possible. So if anyone has any ideas, or personally, or with their company, etc., that can get involved and make a pledge and start to learn and make an impact with us, we would be so grateful for more support. Or we're small and mighty. We're like blueberries, so we're like packed with antioxidants, like packed with good stuff, fiber, but still on the rise. So we need all the help that we can get. So if you have can give financial support, let us know. And or like if you have a superpower that can help us build this movement, join in.